The morning sun cast a warm glow over Beverly Hills as Sarah O'Neill stepped out of her silver Mercedes SUV. At 16, she carried herself with the same quiet confidence that had made her father, basketball legend Shaquille O'Neal, famous both on and off the court. Her two best friends, Jessica and Maya, joined her for what was supposed to be a regular Saturday shopping trip. "This is going to be so much fun," Jessica exclaimed as they walked toward Elegance Avenue, a strip of high-end boutiques known for their exclusive collections. Sarah smiled, adjusting her simple white t-shirt and designer jeans. Despite her family's wealth, she preferred to dress casually and never flaunted her famous last name. Sarah had grown up understanding the value of hard work and humility. As a straight-A student at Beverly Hills High School, she was more proud of her academic achievements than her family's celebrity status. Her father had always taught her that character matters more than fame or money. As they approached La Mode Elite, one of the most prestigious boutiques in the area, Sarah noticed the elaborate window display featuring the latest spring collection. The store had just opened for the day, and through the spotless glass windows, they could see the staff making final adjustments to the clothing racks. Margaret Chen, the boutique manager, was starting her day like any other. She had worked her way up from a sales associate to manager over 8 years, priding herself on maintaining the store's exclusive reputation. That morning, she had gathered her staff for their usual meeting, emphasizing the importance of watching for potential shoplifters, especially during the busy weekend hours. "Remember," she told her team, "we need to be extra vigilant. Our merchandise is valuable, and we can't afford any losses." What Margaret didn't realize was that her so-called vigilance was often colored by her own prejudices. As Sarah and her friends entered the boutique, the soft classical music and subtle fragrance of expensive perfume greeted them. The store was still quiet, with only a few early customers browsing the racks. Jessica immediately gravitated toward a display of designer handbags, while Maya headed for the shoe section. Sarah moved toward the dress collection, her eyes catching a beautiful blue evening gown that reminded her of the upcoming school formal. As she touched the silky fabric, she noticed Margaret Chen's reflection in the mirror, watching her with barely concealed suspicion. Trying to ignore the uncomfortable attention, Sarah continued browsing. She had experienced similar treatment before, but had learned from her father to hold her head high and not let others' prejudices affect her dignity. She selected a few dresses to try on, including the blue gown that had first caught her eye. A young sales associate, Emma, approached Sarah with a genuine smile. "Would you like me to start a fitting room for you?" she asked warmly. Sarah nodded, grateful for the friendly interaction. As Emma led her to the fitting rooms, Margaret Chen's eyes followed their every move. Inside the spacious fitting room, Sarah carefully hung the dresses. Through the door, she could hear Margaret instructing Emma in hushed tones. "Keep a close eye on that one," Margaret whispered, not realizing that Sarah could hear every word. "You never know with these types." Sarah took a deep breath, remembering her father's words from years ago. "Baby girl, some people will judge you without knowing you. Your job isn't to prove them wrong. Your job is to be true to yourself." As she slipped into the blue gown, Sarah couldn't help but smile at her reflection. The dress fit perfectly, highlighting her athletic build and graceful posture. Years of basketball training with her father had given her a natural elegance that even designer clothes couldn't create. Outside the fitting room, Jessica and Maya were waiting eagerly to see how the dresses looked. Other customers had begun filtering into the store, creating a busier atmosphere. The morning sun now streamed fully through the store's windows, making the crystal chandeliers sparkle overhead. What happened next would change not only Sarah's life, but would spark a national conversation about racial profiling in high-end retail. As she stepped out of the fitting room to show her friends the dress, Sarah had no idea that the next few minutes would transform a simple shopping trip into a viral news story that would reach millions. Standing before the three-way mirror, admiring how the dress caught the light, Sarah was about to experience an incident that would prove that even in 2025, prejudice could hide behind the most polished facades. The tension in La Mode Elite began to rise as Margaret Chen's suspicion turned into an unhealthy obsession. Every few minutes, she would find a reason to walk past Sarah, pretending to adjust clothing racks or help other customers. Her behavior didn't go unnoticed by other shoppers, who exchanged uncomfortable glances. Sarah tried on the blue gown, stepping out to show her friends. The dress fit perfectly, its silk fabric flowing elegantly as she turned in front of the mirror. Jessica and Maya exclaimed in delight, taking photos with their phones to help Sarah decide. Their genuine excitement attracted the attention of other customers, who smiled appreciatively at Sarah's choice. "You look absolutely stunning," an elderly woman shopping nearby commented. "That color suits you perfectly, dear." Sarah thanked her politely, her natural grace and good manners evident in every interaction. Meanwhile, Margaret Chen's anxiety seemed to increase with each passing minute. She watched as Sarah went back into the fitting room to try on another dress. Through the security mirrors strategically placed around the store, Margaret observed Sarah's every move, her mind creating scenarios that existed only in her prejudiced imagination. Emma, the young sales associate, tried to intervene. "Miss Chen," she whispered, "I've been helping her, and everything is fine. She's just shopping like anyone else." But Margaret dismissed Emma's assurance with a sharp wave of her hand. "You're too naive," Margaret snapped. "I've been in this business for years. I know what to look for." Her voice carried a hint of authority that made Emma step back, though the younger woman's face showed clear disagreement. Inside the fitting room, Sarah could sense the growing hostility. Through the small gap under the door, she saw Margaret's expensive heels pacing back and forth. She tried to focus on the beautiful dresses instead, slipping into a red cocktail dress that her father would surely love. Jessica and Maya had wandered to a nearby rack, discussing accessories that would match the blue gown. They were already planning the perfect shoes and jewelry, convinced that Sarah would choose that dress for the upcoming formal. The store had gotten busier now, with the late morning crowd filtering in. Well-dressed women browsed through racks of designer clothes, some carrying shopping bags from neighboring boutiques. The atmosphere would have been pleasant if not for the underlying tension created by Margaret's behavior. Sarah stepped out again, this time wearing the red dress. As she walked toward the larger mirror near the fitting room area, Margaret suddenly appeared beside her. "Excuse me," the manager said, her voice sharp enough to make nearby customers turn their heads. "I need to check your fitting room." Before Sarah could respond, Margaret pushed past her and entered the fitting room. The manager's actions were so abrupt that Sarah stumbled slightly, catching herself on the mirror's frame. Jessica and Maya quickly moved to their friend's side, sensing trouble. "Is everything okay?" Maya asked, loud enough for others to hear. She positioned herself slightly in front of Sarah, her protective instinct kicking in. Margaret emerged from the fitting room moments later, her face flushed with what appeared to be disappointment at finding nothing suspicious. She held the blue gown Sarah had tried earlier, examining it closely, as if looking for damage or hidden sensors. Other customers had stopped shopping, watching the scene unfold. The elderly woman who had complimented Sarah earlier shook her head in disapproval at Margaret's behavior. Emma, the sales associate, stood nearby, clearly distressed by her manager's actions. "I heard this dress costs over $4,000, Margaret announced loudly, still holding the blue gown. "I hope you understand that we take security very seriously in this establishment." Her emphasis on security made several customers wince. Sarah maintained her composure, though her hands trembled slightly. "I understand," she said calmly, "and I plan to purchase it after I finish trying on the other dresses." Margaret's eyes narrowed at Sarah's confident response. The manager's prejudice had led her to expect a different reaction, and Sarah's poise seemed to agitate her further. The tension in the store reached a breaking point as Margaret gripped the dress tighter, her knuckles turning white. What happened next would be captured by the store's security cameras and dozens of cell phones, becoming a viral moment that would spark outrage across the nation. The peaceful Saturday shopping trip was about to turn into a scene that would force America to confront its ongoing struggle with racial profiling in retail spaces. Little did Margaret Chen know that her next action would not only end her career, but would also make her the subject of national headlines and a stark reminder of the consequences of unchecked prejudice. The next few moments happened so quickly that witnesses would later give slightly different accounts to the police. What everyone agreed on was that Margaret Chen's actions crossed a line that would change lives forever. As Sarah stood in the red dress, preparing to return to the fitting room, Margaret suddenly blocked her path. "I know what people like you do," she hissed, loud enough for nearby customers to hear. "You try on expensive clothes, then slip them into your bags when no one's looking." The accusation hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Sarah's friends immediately stepped forward, but before they could speak, Margaret grabbed Sarah's arm roughly. The teenager winced at the unexpected contact, but remained remarkably composed. "I haven't done anything wrong," Sarah said calmly, trying to free her arm from Margaret's grip. "Please let go of me." Her voice was steady, but her eyes showed a mix of hurt and disbelief. Several customers had pulled out their phones, recording the scene. Emma, the young sales associate, rushed to call security, recognizing that the situation was spiraling out of control. The elderly woman who had complimented Sarah earlier stepped forward. "Let go of that child immediately," she demanded, but Margaret seemed to have lost all professional composure. "Show me your bag," Margaret shouted, her face red with anger. When Sarah calmly explained that her bag was with her friends and contained nothing from the store, Margaret's reaction shocked everyone present. The sound of the slap echoed through the boutique. Margaret's hand had struck Sarah's face with enough force to leave an instant red mark. The teenager stumbled backward, more from surprise than the impact. The store fell completely silent for a split second before erupting in chaos. "Oh my God," Jessica screamed, rushing to Sarah's side while Maya already had her phone out, dialing a number she knew by heart. Other customers moved quickly, some surrounding Sarah protectively, others confronting Margaret, who seemed to suddenly realize the gravity of what she had done. "I'm calling the police," one man announced, his phone already to his ear. Another customer had rushed outside to get the security guard from the shopping center. Emma stood frozen behind the counter, her hand covering her mouth in horror. Sarah touched her cheek gently, tears welling in her eyes but not falling. She straightened her posture, looking directly at Margaret. "My name is Sarah O'Neill," she said, her voice somehow still steady. "Shaquille O'Neill is my father. You just assaulted me." The color drained from Margaret's face as the implications of her actions began to sink in. She took a step backward, bumping into a clothing rack. The name O'Neill seemed to echo through the store as other customers began to whisper and take more photos. I didn't." Margaret stammered, but it was too late for apologies. The security cameras had captured everything, and at least a dozen customers had recorded the incident on their phones. Already, some were uploading the videos to social media where they would soon go viral. Maya was still on the phone. "Yes, Mr. O'Neill," she said clearly. "We're at La Mode Light on Elegance Avenue. Sarah's okay, but please come quickly." The mention of Shaquille O'Neill's name caused another stir in the store. The shopping center's security guard arrived, quickly assessing the situation. He positioned himself between Sarah and Margaret, speaking into his radio to request additional support. Outside, a small crowd had begun to gather as word spread about the incident. Sarah sat in a chair brought by Emma, maintaining her dignity despite the chaos around her. The red mark on her cheek was becoming more visible, and several customers had offered her ice and water. She accepted both graciously, her composure a stark contrast to Margaret's increasing panic. "The police are on their way," the security guard announced, mainly directing his words to Margaret, who had retreated behind the counter. The manager's hands shook as she tried to straighten her designer suit, a nervous habit that only emphasized her guilty conscience. Within minutes, the sound of sirens could be heard approaching the boutique. But even before the police arrived, the incident had already begun spreading across social media platforms. The hashtag Justice for Sarah O'Neill was trending, and the video of the assault was being shared thousands of times. As police cars pulled up outside, their lights reflecting off the boutique's pristine windows, everyone knew this was just the beginning. The sound of heavy, purposeful footsteps approaching the store's entrance told them that Shaquille O'Neill had arrived, and with him would come a reckoning that would change the face of retail discrimination forever. The arrival of Shaquille O'Neill transformed the boutique's atmosphere instantly. His 7-own frame filled the doorway as he entered, his face a mask of controlled anger. The former NBA star wore a tailored suit that made him look even more imposing, and behind him followed 2 men in business attire, his personal lawyer and security chief. "Sarah?" His deep voice carried across the store. Despite his celebrity status and the gravity of the situation, his first concern was clearly his daughter's well-being. Sarah stood up, still wearing the red dress she'd been trying on when the incident occurred. "I'm okay, Dad," she said, walking toward him. When Shaq saw the red mark on his daughter's cheek, his jaw tightened visibly. The police officers who had arrived moments before respectfully stepped aside as Shaq embraced his daughter. The store had become eerily quiet, with only the sound of camera shutters from outside breaking the silence. A small crowd of onlookers and press had gathered, their phones and cameras pointed toward the boutique's windows. Margaret Chen had retreated to the far corner of the store, her earlier bravado completely gone. She watched as two police officers approached her, their notepads ready. The security footage was already being reviewed on the store's computer system, with additional officers watching the incident unfold on the screen. Mr. O'Neill, one of the senior officers, approached. "We viewed the security footage and taken statements from multiple witnesses. Would you like to press charges?" Shaq's lawyer stepped forward, introducing himself. "We'll be pursuing both criminal and civil charges," he stated firmly. "We have more than enough evidence, including dozens of witness videos and the store's own security footage." The boutique's district manager had arrived, rushing in through the back entrance. She looked horrified as she was briefed on the situation. "Mr. O'Neill, Ms. O'Neill," she began, "I cannot begin to express how deeply sorry we are for this inexcusable incident." Sarah, who had changed back into her own clothes, stood beside her father with remarkable poise. The other customers in the store watched in admiration as she handled the situation with grace beyond her years. "I'd like to make a statement," Sarah said suddenly, surprising everyone. Her father nodded encouragingly, and the police officers prepared to record her words. "What happened today isn't just about me," she began, her voice clear and steady. "It's about every person who has ever been judged by the color of their skin rather than the content of their character. I'm fortunate that I have the resources and support to address this incident, but many others don't." Her words caused several witnesses to nod in agreement, and some even wiped away tears. The district manager looked increasingly distressed, especially when she noticed several news vans pulling up outside the store. Margaret was being led to a police car, her head down as officers escorted her through the back exit to avoid the growing media presence. The charges would include assault of a minor and civil rights violations. Emma, the young sales associate who had tried to prevent the incident, approached Sarah with tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry I didn't do more to stop her," she said. "I knew what she was doing was wrong." Sarah smiled kindly at Emma. "You tried to help, and that matters. Sometimes speaking up against wrong is all we can do." Shaquille O'Neill, who had remained surprisingly calm throughout the aftermath, finally spoke to the gathering of witnesses and staff. "My daughter and I will ensure that this incident leads to positive change," he announced. "This isn't about revenge, it's about education and transformation." As the police finished taking statements and the crowd outside grew larger, Sarah's friends hugged her goodbye, promising to check on her later. The district manager was already on the phone with corporate headquarters, her face pale as she explained the situation. The story was spreading rapidly across social media platforms. #JusticeFor Sarah O'Neill had become the top trending topic nationwide, with celebrities, athletes, and civil rights leaders all sharing their support and similar experiences. As father and daughter prepared to leave the store, Sarah paused by the blue dress she had originally planned to buy. The district manager quickly stepped forward. "Please," she said, "we would be honored if you would accept it as a gift." But Sarah shook her head. "No, thank you," she replied firmly. "What happened here today is more important than any dress." As they walked out of La Moda Light, cameras flashing and reporters calling out questions, it was clear that this incident would become a turning point in the ongoing conversation about racial profiling in retail. The next few days would bring changes that no one, especially Margaret Chen, could have anticipated. The day after the incident, the O'Neill family home buzzed with activity. Shaquille O'Neill sat in his home office, surrounded by his legal team, while Sarah rested in the family room, her phone constantly lighting up with messages of support from around the world. The morning news shows had all led with the story. Footage from the boutique played on every major network, accompanied by headlines like "Basketball legend's daughter assaulted in high-end store" and "Racial profiling incident sparks national outrage." The security camera footage, showing Margaret Chen's unprovoked assault, had been viewed millions of times across social media platforms. Mr. O'Neill, his lead attorney, said, reviewing documents spread across the massive oak desk, "We've received calls from multiple civil rights organizations wanting to join our lawsuit. They see this as an opportunity to address systematic discrimination in retail. Shaq nodded thoughtfully, his eyes drifting to a family photo on his desk. It showed Sarah at her recent basketball tournament, smiling proudly with her team. The sight of his daughter's happy face made the red mark he'd seen on her cheek yesterday even more infuriating. In the kitchen, Sarah's mother was preparing breakfast while fielding calls from concerned family friends. She'd already turned down 17 interview requests from various media outlets, wanting to protect her daughter from excessive public exposure. Sarah sat on the couch, reading through thousands of social media messages. Many were from other young people sharing similar experiences of being profiled while shopping. Some made her cry, others made her determined to create change. "Dad," she called out, walking into his office with her phone, "you need to see this." She showed him a viral video of peaceful protesters gathering outside La Mode Light, holding signs that read, "Shop with dignity," and "End retail racism." The boutique had remained closed since the incident, its windows now covered with paper. The parent company's stock had dropped significantly, and their social media accounts were flooded with angry comments and calls for boycotts. Shaq's phone rang. It was Charles Barkley, his friend and fellow NBA legend. "Hey, brother," Charles said, his voice serious, "I'm going on air tonight to talk about what happened to Sarah. This isn't just about your daughter anymore. It's about every kid who's ever been followed around a store or made to feel like they don't belong." As the morning progressed, the family security team reported that several news vans had gathered at their gated community's entrance. Reporters were hoping for a statement from the O'Neills. Meanwhile, at the local police station, Margaret Chen sat in an interrogation room with her lawyer. The gravity of her actions was finally sinking in as she faced multiple charges. Her attorney had just informed her that the boutique's parent company was distancing itself from her actions, releasing a statement that her behavior in no way reflected company values. Back at the O'Neill residence, Sarah was preparing for an important conversation. She had asked to meet with her father's legal team to discuss her ideas for turning this incident into something positive. "I don't just want to sue them," she explained to her father. "I want to create a program that helps businesses understand and prevent racial profiling. Maybe we can work with them instead of against them." Shaq looked at his daughter with pride. Even after being humiliated and assaulted, she was thinking about how to help others and create lasting change. It reminded him of his own mother's teachings about turning negative experiences into opportunities for growth. The family's phones buzzed simultaneously. It was a news alert. The boutique's parent company had just announced the immediate implementation of mandatory diversity training across all their stores nationwide. They'd also revealed plans to create a diversity and inclusion officer position at the corporate level. "It's a start," Sarah said, reading the announcement, "but we need to make sure it's not just for show." Shaq gathered his family together in the living room. His lawyer had prepared a press statement, but he wanted their input first, especially Sarah's. As they sat together, discussing how to address the public, it was clear that this incident would become more than just another viral moment. The O'Neill family, with their platform and resources, had the power to turn one teenager's humiliating experience into a movement for change. As they finalized their statement, Sarah added one crucial line: "This isn't about punishment, it's about progress." Outside, the sun was setting on another Los Angeles evening, but this story was far from over. The next few days would bring developments that would impact not just one boutique or one company, but the entire retail industry's approach to customer service and racial sensitivity. The media storm that followed the boutique incident grew into a national conversation. 1 week after the assault, news channels were still running the story as their lead segment, with social media engagement reaching unprecedented levels. Sarah's video had been viewed over 50 million times across various platforms. Celebrity supporters, from basketball stars to exclusive interviews with the O'Neill family, after careful consideration, they chose to speak with a respected female journalist known for her thoughtful coverage of social issues. The interview was scheduled to be filmed at their home. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Shaq asked Sarah as the camera crew set up in their living room. She nodded, adjusting her simple blue dress, purposely chosen from a different boutique. The interview began with the journalist asking Sarah to describe the incident. As security footage played on a split screen, Sarah's composed narration drew millions of viewers. Her poise and maturity impressed everyone watching. "What hurt most wasn't the slap," Sarah explained, her voice steady. "It was knowing that someone could look at me and see only their prejudices, not a human being. Her words resonated across social media, with thousands sharing their similar experiences. Meanwhile, Margaret Chen's story took several turns. After being released on bail, she had gone into hiding, but photos emerged of her leaving her attorney's office. The images showed a different person. Gone was the arrogant boutique manager, replaced by someone who seemed to have aged years and days. La Mode Elite's parent company faced mounting pressure. Their stock had dropped 30% since the incident, and competitors were quickly announcing their own anti-discrimination initiatives to avoid similar situations. The company's CEO finally appeared on national television. "We failed," he admitted, looking directly into the camera. "Not just Sarah O'Neill, but countless others who may have faced discrimination in our stores. Today, we're announcing a complete overhaul of our training programs and hiring practices." Back at the O'Neill household, Sarah read email after email from young people sharing their stories. Some had been followed in stores, others had been asked to show receipts when no one else was questioned. Each message strengthened her resolve to create change. Civil rights organizations approached the O'Neills with proposals for collaboration. Companies reached out wanting to be part of the solution. Even competing luxury brands contacted Shaq's team, asking for guidance on improving their practices. The story took another turn when Emma, the young sales associate from the boutique, gave an interview to a local news station. "I saw this kind of profiling happen before," she revealed. "Many of us were uncomfortable with it, but we were afraid to speak up. Sarah's courage has given others the strength to come forward." More former employees began sharing stories about Margaret Chen's history of discriminatory behavior. It became clear that the incident with Sarah wasn't an isolated event, but part of a pattern that had gone unchecked. Social media platforms were filled with videos of people sharing their own retail discrimination stories. Celebrities posted about times they were profiled before becoming famous. The conversation had grown beyond one incident to address systemic issues in retail. The O'Neills' legal team announced they would file a class action lawsuit, not just for Sarah, but for others who had experienced similar treatment at La Mode Elite. The goal wasn't just monetary compensation, but structural change in how retail establishments trained their staff and treated customers. "We want to set a precedent," Shaq's lawyer explained to reporters gathered outside his office. "This case could help establish new standards for retail discrimination cases." As the interview in their home concluded, the journalist asked Sarah what message she had for other young people who might face similar situations. Sarah thought for a moment before responding. "Stand up for yourself, but do it with dignity," she said. "Your worth isn't determined by how others treat you, but by how you respond to treatment. And most importantly, use your voice to help others who might not have the platform to speak for themselves." The journalists ended the segment by noting that Sarah's response to the incident had transformed a moment of discrimination into a movement for change. As the camera crew packed up their equipment, Sarah received another notification. The state legislature had just announced hearings on retail discrimination, inspired by her case. The story had moved beyond the viral video stage into something more lasting. What happened next would depend on how businesses, lawmakers, and society responded to the uncomfortable truths that Sarah's experience had brought to light. 2 weeks after the incident, the legal proceedings began to take shape. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters as Margaret Chen made her first court appearance to face criminal charges. The former boutique manager looked pale and drawn as she entered the building, surrounded by her legal team. Inside the courtroom, Sarah sat with her parents, watching as Chen pleaded not guilty to charges of assault and civil rights violations. The prosecutor presented the security footage, which played on screens throughout the courtroom. Many observers gasped audibly when they saw the slap, even though most had already seen it online. "The evidence is clear," the prosecutor stated. "This was not just a simple assault, but an act motivated by racial prejudice." Chen sat motionless, staring straight ahead as the charges were read. Meanwhile, the civil lawsuit against La Mode Elite had grown significantly. Over 50 former customers had come forward with similar stories of discrimination at various store locations. The O'Neills' legal team had gathered sworn statements from former employees who testified about systematic profiling practices. The company knew about these incidents, Sarah's lawyer explained to the judge. They received complaints but chose to ignore them. This culture of discrimination went far beyond one manager's actions. La Mode Elite's corporate offices were in chaos. Their initial response of simply firing Chen and issuing an apology had proved insufficient. After days of emergency meetings, the board of directors made a surprising announcement. They wanted to settle the lawsuit, but not with just money. The company's new CEO, who had replaced her predecessor amid the scandal, reached out to the O'Neills with an unusual proposal. "We want to work with Sarah," she explained during a private meeting. "Help us create a new standard for retail inclusion." Sarah listened carefully to the proposal. The company offered to establish a $50 million fund for victims of retail discrimination and create a comprehensive training program that would be shared industry-wide. Most importantly, they wanted Sarah to help design and oversee these initiatives. "We're not just trying to make this go away," the CDO explained. "We want to be part of the solution." Back in criminal court, Margaret Chen's trial moved quickly. The evidence was overwhelming, with multiple videos and dozens of witnesses. Her lawyers attempted to portray her actions as a momentary lapse in judgment, not racial prejudice, but the jury wasn't convinced. After 3 days of testimony, Chen was found guilty on all charges. The judge, noting the public nature of the assault and its impact on a minor, sentenced her to 18 months in prison and mandatory counseling. She would also be required to participate in racial sensitivity programs both during and after her sentence. As Chen was led away in handcuffs, Sarah turned to her father. "I feel sorry for her," she said quietly. "Her prejudice didn't just hurt me, it destroyed her life too." The civil case resolution made headlines across the country. The settlement included not just monetary compensation, but sweeping changes to retail practices. La Mode Elite agreed to create a retail inclusion council, with Sarah as a founding member. Implement comprehensive anti-discrimination training across all stores. Install new security systems that would flag and review any incidents of potential profiling. Establish scholarships for minority students interested in retail management. Fund regular audits by independent civil rights organizations. The settlement became a model for other retailers. Major brands began contacting the O'Neills, asking to participate in the new training programs. What had started as a single incident was transforming the entire retail industry. Sarah's role in these changes earned her recognition from civil rights organizations. She was invited to speak at conferences and universities, sharing her story and vision for change. Despite the attention, she remained focused on her studies and basketball, refusing to let the incident define her life. "Sometimes bad things happen so that good things can follow," she told a reporter who asked about her feelings toward Margaret Chen. "I hope she learns and grows from this, just like the retail industry is trying to do." The legal phase of the story was ending, but its impact continued to grow. Other industries began examining their own practices, recognizing that what happened at La Mode Elite could happen anywhere prejudice went unchecked. As Sarah left the courthouse for the final time, she knew that the real work was just beginning. The legal victory was important, but changing hearts and minds would take much longer. She was ready for that challenge, knowing that her experience could help prevent others from facing similar discrimination. 1 year after the incident at La Mode Elite, Sarah O'Neill stood at a podium in front of a packed auditorium. The occasion was the launch of the Shop with Dignity Foundation, an organization she had created with the support of her father and several major retail companies. The foundation's headquarters occupied an entire floor of a downtown Los Angeles office building. Its walls displayed photos and stories of people who had faced retail discrimination, serving as a constant reminder of why their work mattered. "Change doesn't happen overnight," Sarah told the audience, which included retail executives, civil rights leaders, and even Margaret Chen's daughter, who had reached out to Sarah months earlier to apologize for her mother's actions. "But it happens with every person who chooses to speak up, every business that chooses to do better." Margaret Chen herself had undergone a transformation during her time in prison. She had written Sarah a lengthy letter of apology, describing how the counseling and sensitivity training had helped her recognize her deep-seated prejudices. Sarah's response, encouraging Chen to use her experience to help others, had moved many when it was made public. La Mode Elite, under new leadership, had become a model for retail inclusion. Their training program, developed with Sarah's input, was now being used by stores across the country. Security footage from their stores showed a dramatic decrease in profiling incidents, and customer satisfaction scores had reached all-time highs. The Foundation's first major initiative was a certification program for retail establishments. Stores that met strict anti-discrimination standards could display a Shop with Dignity seal, which quickly became a symbol customers looked for before making purchases. Sarah, now 17, had managed to balance her advocacy work with her normal teenage life. She maintained her excellent grades and led her basketball team to the state championships. Colleges were already showing interest, impressed by both her athletic abilities and her leadership in social change. Shaquille O'Neal watched proudly as his daughter addressed the audience. The incident that could have left her bitter had instead inspired her to create positive change. The Foundation was already making a difference, with reported cases of retail discrimination dropping significantly in stores that had adopted their programs. The Shop with Dignity movement had spread beyond retail. Hotels, restaurants, and other service industries were now reaching out to implement similar training programs. Sarah's story had become a case study in how to transform a negative experience into systemic change. Even fashion magazines had taken notice. Sarah appeared on several covers, not as a victim of discrimination, but as a leader in retail reform. Her simple message about treating everyone with dignity resonated across cultural and economic lines. In a surprising development, the boutique where the incident occurred had been transformed into the Foundation's first training center. The same space where Sarah had been assaulted now hosted workshops teaching retailers how to recognize and prevent discrimination. The security footage that had captured the assault was now used in training sessions nationwide, but always with a message of hope and change rather than anger. Sarah insisted that the focus remain on prevention and education rather than punishment. Margaret Chen, after serving her sentence, had asked to join the Foundation's efforts. After careful consideration, Sarah and her team agreed, believing that Chen's story could help others recognize and address their own biases. Chen now spoke at training sessions, sharing her journey from prejudice to understanding. As Sarah concluded her speech at the Foundation's launch, she shared a final thought that captured the spirit of everything that had happened since that day in the boutique. What matters isn't just what happens to us, but what we choose to do about it. The audience rose in a standing ovation, but Sarah's attention was drawn to a group of young girls in the front row, their eyes filled with hope and admiration. They were part of a mentorship program the Foundation had created, helping young people develop confidence and leadership skills. 1 year after a moment of discrimination had gone viral, the story had evolved into something few could have predicted. A teenager's composure in the face of prejudice had sparked a movement that was changing how businesses operated and how people treated each other. As Sarah left the podium, surrounded by well-wishers and supporters, she knew that this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of a larger conversation about dignity, respect, and the power of turning pain into progress. The incident at La Mode Elite would be remembered not for the assault, but for the positive changes it inspired in its wake.